simply says it to the Colossian church. He said God just don't accept anything. He said God will receive you just as you are. But he says, just like when we select our mates, we have a set of standards that we want them to live by. God says, when you come in this house, I already got a set of standards. He said, I don't need you to rewrite the standards. You can't compromise the standards. I'm not going to slack the standards. I have a set of standards for you to live by. He said, but in your achieving these standards, I will be patient with you. He said, but I do have a desire for you to change. I don't want you to remain the same way you were when you walked in. He said, that's the reason you walked in the first place. Because you were looking for something different. Now that he says, now that you have received something different in your heart, you ought to have some signs on the outside that you are different. He says, how will men know that you are sons of me? By the way that you show love to other people. We have a hard time sometimes just showing love to each other in the church. He says, if you want to really become Christ-like, he says it starts with showing love, and everything else will line up in that. He says you got to learn how to love one another. He didn't say you was going to like everything they did. He didn't say that they weren't going to talk about you behind your back. He simply says you still got to learn to love. He said the stuff that you face, I faced it 10 times worse. He said they talked about me behind my back, in front of my face. He said they knelt me down and spit on me. What do you spit on? You spit on the ground. They simply told Jesus you are worthless. He said, but I still love them. I love them enough to ask the Lord to forgive them. Why? They ain't got a clue what they're doing. That's the same thing you can ask the Lord, because everybody doesn't know you're a Christian. So when somebody treats you bad, you can ask the Lord, Lord, forgive them. Because they really don't know what they're doing. He says you got to learn how to love. The doors of the church are open. For someone who wants to learn how to love not only themselves, you got to love yourself first, but then learn how to love others. He says you can come down now for baptism, you can come down for rededication, you can come down now for prayer, because you want to learn how excellent the Lord really is. The Lord has done so many things for you. The only word you really could say that would maximize it is say that the Lord is excellent.
Yes, He is.
He's not subpar. He's not good. He's beyond perfect. He's excellent.
Yes.
That's the only word I can use to describe him. More words are out there, but the word I choose to use is he is excellent in everything that he does. Whether we understand what he's doing, when we don't understand what he's doing, he's still excellent. Father, sings.